Now this is the kind of place I like. Dark corners, strong drinks, and nobody asking too many questions. You ever hear of a whole fleet just disappearing? I'm not talking about a ship or two lost to pirates or a bad hyperspace jump. I mean hundreds of warships, top of the line at the time, just vanishing into the void, gone for decades. They called it the Katana Fleet. 200 Republic Dreadnoughts linked together in the most advanced control system of their day. A fleet that could be controlled with a fraction of the usual crew, all slaved together to a single command. Brilliant idea, right? Yeah, until it wasn't. Official story goes like this. The fleet's crew got infected with some kind of high virus that made them go mad, and in their delirium, they jumped into hyperspace all at once, with no one left sane enough to bring them back. And for nearly 50 years, they were gone. No wreckage, no signals, no survivors. Eventually, a few of the ships were found and recovered. Some big shots, Imperials, the New Republic, and even the Hutts managed to grab what they could. But the thing is, there were 200 ships in that fleet, and not all of them were accounted for. See, when something disappears like that, people start telling stories. Some folks say the fleet hit a gravity well, got yanked into some dead system, and drifted there until it was found. Others claim it was deliberately hidden, stashed away by someone who had plans for it later. But I heard a different story. Met a guy out on Phobos, ex-Navy, said he got a look at one of the first Katana ships they found. Said the bridge was sealed from the inside. Crew was gone, not dead, not skeletons in seats, just vanished. Except for the captain. They found him curled up in a maintenance tunnel, still gripping a blaster, but the bolt was fired into his own head. That's not even the weird part. Before he died, he carved something into the bulkhead with his knife. Not a distress call, not coordinates, just 3 words, scratched over and over again until his fingers bled. We never left. Now, maybe it was just the ramblings of a madman, maybe it didn't mean anything, but the crew was missing. No logs, no escape pods, no bodies. Just the whisper of an old captain who put a blaster to his own head and left a warning behind. Now, here's the part the Empire didn't want getting out. See, when Thrawn and his people found the Katana Fleet, they were expecting wreckage. Old warships with rusted out systems, maybe a few intact blaster turrets. But some of those ships, they still had power. Not much, just emergency lighting, faint life support still humming along. But if they'd been dead for decades, who was keeping them online? I knew a guy, a real scavenger type, made a living picking through wrecks. He wasn't part of the big recovery, but he found something off the books. A Katana-class dreadnought floating in a dead system way beyond the known fleet coordinates. He figured it was a jackpot. A lost warship, untouched for decades? That's a fortune in salvage. But when he got inside, the first thing he noticed was the helmets. Old Republic gear still lying on the deck where the crew had left them. But when he picked one up, there was no skull inside. Just the helmet. No blood, no signs of trauma, just empty. And then he heard the sound. Not voices, not footsteps, just a beacon, a distress signal flickering on for the first time in 50 years. And it wasn't just the usual mayday, it was coordinates. It was calling something. Now, my friend, he was a lot braver or stupider than me. Instead of running, he followed the beacon deeper into the ship. He found the old medbay. The Bacta tanks were still full, which shouldn't have been possible. But what was floating inside them? Not bodies, not crew, something else. Something that moved. He didn't get a look, he ran, as fast as his legs would carry him, but when he got to his ship, the airlock was already open. Now, he knew he closed it. He always did. And inside his ship, on his own console, was a single message flashing on his screen. Just 3 words. We never left. Now, if you ask the Imperials, the New Republic, the big players in the galaxy, they'll tell you the same thing. the Katana Fleet is accounted for. But if that's true, then why do some old Republic transponders still send out signals from the void? Why do deep space scouts still pick up phantom pings from Katana-class Dreadnoughts that should have been found years ago? Why do some hyperspace lanes reroute themselves like they're avoiding something that shouldn't be there? Now, I don't know about you, but if I ever see an old Republic warship just floating out there in the dark, I'm leaving it alone. Because some wrecks, they're better left lost. And some crews, they never left. Now, who's buying the next round? You ever met an Ubies? Yeah, those folks in the breath masks, always standing off in the shadows, never saying much. You see them in back alley cantinas, taking mercenary work, keeping to themselves. No one sees their faces, no one hears their real voices. And the smart ones, they don't ask questions. See, the Ubies don't just wear those masks because they like the fashion. They wear them because they can't breathe like the rest of us. Not anymore. Not since their homeworld, Uber 4, was turned into a poisoned graveyard. The official story? Some kind of chemical disaster, maybe an industrial accident, maybe a bioweapon test gone wrong. Either way, the Republic tried to cover it up. But here's the thing. The Ubies aren't just angry that their world was destroyed. They're afraid of what's still on it. Now, the Republic says they didn't mean to wipe out the Ubies. Some bureaucrat probably filed the wrong paperwork, and next thing you know, a whole planet's ecosystem is ash. But there are other stories. Some say that the Ubies were building weapons of their own, something big, something dangerous. Maybe the Republic didn't want the competition. And then there's a third story, one that only gets whispered in the right places. That the Republic wasn't trying to kill the Ubies, they were trying to kill something else. Something that shouldn't have been there in the first place. Now, I knew a guy, a scavenger who specialized in pre-Republic tech. He was always looking for forgotten places, dead worlds where he could strip old ruins clean and sell whatever he found to the highest bidder. One day, he comes across a set of old coordinates, Uber 4. He figured, hey, the place is abandoned, no competition, probably some old bunkers left over, maybe some tech nobody had gotten to yet. So he lands, and the first thing he notices? The fog. Thick, clinging to the surface like it was alive. You couldn't see 5 feet ahead of you. Supposed to be nothing living on the whole planet. No plants, no animals, not even bacteria. Except, something was moving in that fog. He saw shapes, just at the edge of his vision. And when he called out, the fog answered. Now, the first guy never made it back. But some years later, a mercenary crew decided to check Uber 4 for themselves. They were looking for weapons, tech, maybe even a hidden Republic vault. What they found was a sealed bunker. And here's the thing, this bunker wasn't locked from the inside. It had been welded shut from the outside. Like someone wanted to keep something in. They cut their way in. Inside they found Ubies armor, dozens of suits stacked against the walls, left behind like their owners had just vanished. But no bodies, no skeletons, just armor. Weapons still loaded, power cells still charged. Like they'd been expecting a fight but never got the chance to fire a shot. And then, the doors slammed shut behind them. Now, these mercs were tough. Ex-military, bounty hunters, the kind of people who don't scare easy. But when they got out of that bunker, they were shaken. One of them, big guy, cybernetics, no-nonsense type, refused to take his helmet off ever again. He wouldn't talk about what he saw, wouldn't even let the medics scan him. But I heard the recordings. Just before they left the bunker, their comms picked up something. A sound. Not words, not a distress call, just breathing. Like something was still in there, like something had been waiting. And just before their ship broke atmo, they got one last transmission. A message from an old Republic outpost. A signal that had been broadcasting on repeat for over a century. The air is dead, but the moon is not. Now, you ask the Republic, they'll tell you Uber 4 is just another dead world. You ask the Ubies, they'll tell you never to go back. And those mercs, well, the ones who made it out, they never spoke about it, not once. But the strangest thing, that big guy, the one who refused to take off his helmet, Couple months later, he just disappeared. Walked out of a cantina on Nar Shaddaa, never seen again. And the only thing he left behind? His helmet. Now I'm not saying the Republic was covering up something worse than a genocide. I'm just saying some ghosts don't need faces. And some of them still wear breath masks. Now who's buying the next round? Jakku. Now there's a name that makes people roll their eyes. Nothing but sand, wreckage, and scavengers picking through the bones of dead ships. A backwater world, even by Outer Rim standards. But see, that's the lie. People think Jakku's just a junkyard because what the Empire left behind. The wreckage of the last great battle, where the Empire made its final stand and the New Republic took its victory lap. But here's the thing. The Battle of Jakku, that wasn't about stopping the Empire. That was about burying something. Something Palpatine didn't want anyone to find. Now, old Sheev. Yeah, I said it. He had hidden observatories all over the galaxy. Little secret vaults filled with Sith relics, ancient star charts, things no sane person should go looking for. Most of them were out in the unknown regions. His contingency plan for after the Empire fell. But Jakku? Jakku was different. Because Jakku wasn't just an archive. Jakku was a failsafe. See, Palpy wasn't interested in Jakku for its location or its resources. He was interested in what was already there, and he built his observatory on top of it. I knew a guy, a scavenger turned mercenary who got a lead on an Imperial site buried under Jakku's surface. Most people were too busy digging through Star Destroyers to care about what was beneath their feet, but he had coordinates. They led him to an old Imperial hatch buried under decades of sand. Had the Imperial crest on it and everything. Sealed tight, no entry, no records. And that's where things got weird. He sliced the console, expecting some military archive, maybe a weapons cache, but when the doors unlocked, there weren't even data pads. There weren't files, there was just a pit. A massive hole carved into the bedrock leading straight down into the dark. And at the bottom, something was moving. Now, my friend's far from stupid. He didn't just jump in. He sent a drone down first. Small recon probe, nothing fancy, just enough to get a look. The feed came through his visor. First 20 meters, just smooth rock, like the shaft had been dug by hand, or something worse. Then it opened into a chamber, and that's when the feed cut out. No signal, no interference, just gone. And then the whispers started. At first he thought it was just the wind moving through the tunnels, but no, it was words. Spoken in basic, spoken in high galactic, spoken in Sith. He ran, didn't bother sealing the door behind him. He got back to his ship, punched in hyperspace coordinates and never went back. But the weirdest part was his drone's data logs. There was one last frame before the signal cut. A figure, not a person, not a stormtrooper, just a silhouette standing at the bottom of the pit, looking up. Now, this guy, he was shaken. He tried drinking it off, but it wasn't working. He said he kept hearing the voices even in his sleep. And then, about a week later, I heard his ship went missing. No distress call, no escape pod launched. Just gone. They found the wreck drifting near the Corellian trade spine, engines burned out, but the cockpit was empty, except for his helmet. Visor shattered, comms still active. Looping the last transmission he ever sent. Just 2 words. It's awake. Now, you can believe whatever you want about Jakku. You can believe it's just another desert wasteland, a place the Empire picked for a last stand because it was easy to fortify. Or you can ask yourself, why did Palpatine choose Jakku for his final observatory? Why did the Empire destroy its own base before the battle even started? And why did the last Imperial officers in the war give their lives not to win, but to make sure no one went looking? Maybe Jakku was a research facility, maybe it was a prison, or maybe Jakku wasn't just a junkyard, it was a warning. Now, if you ever find a sealed hatch buried in the sand, leave it closed. Now, who's got the next round? You ever been to a battlefield Not one of those clean, strategic places where admirals sit in orbit and push fleets around like sabacc chips. I mean a real battlefield. The kind where the dead outnumber the living, where the ground itself is soaked with the blood of people who didn't even know why they were fighting. I've seen a few, but there's one place I'll never go back to. Malachor 5. Now most spaces know to stay away, not because there's anything alive there, but because there's something worse. Something that isn't dead. Not really. Malachor's been cursed for millennia. Ancient Sith built temples there long before the Republic even knew it existed. Jedi weren't even supposed to set foot on it, but that didn't stop Revan. See, during the Mandalorian Wars, the Republic was losing. The Mandos were stronger, faster, and they didn't play by the rules. So Revan changed the rules. He ordered his general, a Jedi woman, to use a new weapon, something built to end the war in a single moment. The Mass Shadow Generator. Sounds like some fancy name, right? But let me tell you what it really did. It didn't just destroy ships, it ripped them out of the sky, smashed them together, ground them into dust. It shattered the planet beneath it. And the people? They didn't just die, they were pulled apart, body, mind, and soul. They say the battle ended in seconds, but some of the soldiers, they never left. Now, I knew a guy, a scavenger, ran jobs out in the Rim, picking through old battlefields for tech. One day, he gets a tip, some Mandalorian wreckage on Malachor, untouched since the war. He figured he'd get in, strip some armor, maybe find a few credits worth of Beskar. A classic story, and easy money. So he lands, and the first thing he notices? It's quiet. Not just deserted planet quiet, not even abandoned warzone quiet. I mean, wrong. No wind, no dust shifting, no sound at all. And then, he hears voices. Not talking, not yelling, screaming. Now, my friend, he was tough, but he wasn't stupid. He got back to his ship and left. Fast forward a couple of years, and a bigger crew decides they want a shot at Malachor. They'd heard the stories, thought they were just stories. They weren't. This time, they landed near one of the old temples, said it was still intact, despite the whole planet being cracked apart. Inside, nothing but ruins, dust and bodies turned to stone, like they'd been frozen in place. One of the crew swore he saw something moving in the shadows, a hooded figure, but when he turned his light, there was nothing there. Then, the statues started whispering. Now, when I say whispering, I don't mean the wind, I don't mean echoes, I mean words, voices coming from the statues themselves. Some in Basic, some in Mandor, some in Sith. They ran. But one of them, he didn't make it. They found his comms unit still broadcasting, but he was gone. Not dead, not torn apart, just gone. And the last thing recorded, they're still fighting. Now I know what you're thinking. Old war zone, bunch of dead Sith, maybe some weird energy fields, nothing supernatural about that. But here's the thing, when the mass shadow generator activated, it didn't just kill people, it ripped their souls apart. Some say that's why the statues whisper. They're not memories, they're echoes. Fragments of Jedi and Mandos still locked in battle. And sometimes, if you listen real close, you can still hear them fighting. But hey, if you don't believe me, go see for yourself. Just don't stay long. And if you see someone standing in the ruins, watching you, don't turn your back. Now, who's got the next round? You ever sell something and regret it later? I don't mean a bad deal, I mean you sell something later and find out it shouldn't have been sold at all. Well, I had a job once, moving some questionable goods. Some Sith artifacts, old blades, broken holocrons, relics from a time when the galaxy was a whole lot darker. I figured they'd end up in some collector's vault, or maybe in some hut's trophy case. But the people who bought them, they weren't collectors. They called themselves the Acolytes of the Beyond. And the worst part? Some of them disappeared. Now, the galaxy's full of cults. Groups that worship ancient gods, a twisted version of the Force, or things best left forgotten. Most of them are harmless fanatics, more likely to chant in dark rooms than actually do anything. But the Acolytes of the Beyond, they were different. They believed the Sith never really died, that their spirits were trapped inside their weapons. Every Sith sword, every relic, every scrap of armor wasn't just an artifact, it was a prison. And their whole goal? To return the weapons to their original owners, even if those owners had been dead for 1,000 years. Some say they were just delusional, others say they were right. I had a buyer on Dremund Cast once, a world steeped in Sith history. He was one of those acolytes, dressed in dark robes, quiet, always looking over his shoulder. He bought an old Sith sword off me, not a lightsaber, one of those old jagged blades, the kind that cuts deeper than it should. Didn't even haggle, just paid full price and walked away like he was carrying something sacred. A few weeks later, he was gone. His home was still locked from the inside, no signs of struggle. But the weirdest part was the sword. It was laid neatly on his bed, and the walls were covered in messages, etched into the stone, scratched over and over like he'd carved them with his bare fingers. He is coming. He is awake. We are only the door. Now, I don't usually ask questions after a sale, bad habit for a smuggler, but I started hearing rumors. Whole groups of acolytes heading out to forgotten Sith worlds, Malachor, Ziost, Oricon, digging through ruins, searching for something. One group, they found an old temple hidden beneath the sands of Korriban. They sent out one last transmission before they were never heard from again. We have heard them, and they are hungry. Now here's the part that keeps me up at night. One of them came back. Acolyte named Seran, used to be a loudmouth, always talking about the will of the Sith. When he returned, he was silent. Wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat, just stared at the walls. And every night, he'd take a Sith dagger and place it at the foot of his bed, like he was waiting for something to pick it up. And sometimes, I swear I heard him whispering to it. Now, you can believe whatever you want. Maybe the Acolytes were just delusional, worshipping dead men who never listened, or maybe they were just doorways, and something walked through. Next time you see a Sith relic for sale, ask yourself, who's buying? Anyways, who's buying the next round? Ever hear screaming in hyperspace? Yeah, I see that look. I bet half the spaces in here would roll their eyes if they heard me say it out loud. Just sensor ghosts, they'd say. Radiation noise, tricks of the mind. But anyone who's spent enough time out in the void, they know better. They know about the Starweird. I hope you never see one, because if you do, you probably won't live long enough to tell the story. Now, nobody knows where they came from. Some say they're the ghosts of dead pilots lost in deep space screaming for help. Others say they're not ghosts at all, that they've been here longer than hyperspace travel, that they're older than the Republic, older than the Sith, older than the Jedi, and we were never supposed to see them. Because here's the thing, they don't show up on scanners, they don't register on sensors, but the moment you see one, it sees you too, and it doesn't forget. Now, I heard a story once. A pilot, Corellian guy, took a run through the Kessel sector. Nothing unusual, just a routine spice haul. Didn't make it to the other side. But here's the spooky part. A week later, his ship came out of hyperspace, drifting. No distress call, no signs of damage, hyperdrive still working fine. Except, there was no one aboard. Cockpit was empty, crash webbing still locked, rations untouched, like he'd just vanished. Now, the recovery crew found the flight recorder, figured it'd tell them what had happened, and it did. It played 20 minutes of silence. Then, right before the final jump, a scream, loud enough to blow out the audio levels. And then static, and after that, nothing. They searched the whole ship, no signs of a fight, no blood, no life signs, just an empty ship, and a comms log of a man who wasn't there anymore. Now, some stories, you hear them secondhand. Some guy who knew a guy, right? But this one happened to me. 5 years back, I was running a quiet job from Terminus out toward Rune. Nothing special, just me, my co-pilot, my ship, and Hyperspace. About halfway through the jump, my co-pilot shakes me awake. "Something's outside," he says, and I look. Now, you ever wake up too fast and things don't make sense right away? That's what it felt like. My head wasn't processing what I was looking at, because something was out there, drifting, keeping pace with us. No suit, no ship, just a figure. Tall, thin, white as a bone. Eyes, if you could even call them that, deep pits of black, and the moment I saw it, it turned and looked right at me. I wish I could say it was a hallucination. Hyperspace tricks, exhaustion, bad rations. But here's the thing, my co-pilot saw it too. We just sat there, staring at it. Then, it smiled. Now, I don't panic easy. You don't last long in my line of work if you do. But in that moment, every nerve in my body was screaming at me to run. So I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled us out of hyperspace hard. Too hard. Nearly tore the motivator apart. And just like that, it was gone. Now here's the part that don't sit right with me. We weren't the only ones on that ship. We had a protocol droid on board, old but still functional, had an internal recorder always running in the background. When we landed, I checked the playback, wanted proof I wasn't losing my mind. For the first 30 seconds, nothing but normal hyperspace readings. Then, a new audio file, 3 seconds long. Not a distortion, not static, a voice, deep, hollow, and one word, soon. Now, I'm not saying you should believe me, hell, I wouldn't believe me either, but you ever hear a pilot swear up and down that they saw something out there in hyperspace? Something that shouldn't have been there? Don't laugh at them. And if you're ever out there alone, mid-jump, listen. Because if you hear a scream, you jump to lightspeed. Because if you hear a scream, you jump to lightspeed right then. Because if you wait long enough to see one, it's already too late. Alright, enough of that. Who's got the next round? Ever been to Endor? Yeah, I know what you're thinking. The forest moon, Ewoks, cuddly little furballs. Sure, that's what they want you to think when you hear the name. But Endor's got other moons. And one of them, nobody talks about. Not the Republic, not the Empire, not even the Ewoks. Now, if a warlord or a Hutt keeps quiet about a place, that just means they're hiding something. But when an entire species won't even say its name, that means something bad happened there. Something that should have stayed buried. A long time ago, before the Empire ever set foot on the Endor system, there was a colony on one of the dead moons. Not the lush forest moon, the dark one. Barren rock, no life, just an endless grey surface under a poison green sky. Republic logs say settlers moved in, started terraforming, said the moon had resources, potential for mining. It was going fine until their transmissions started changing. At first, just garbled messages, like the signal was degrading. Then, their voices started sounding wrong. Slower, stretched out like they were talking underwater. 1 month later, all transmissions stopped. The Republic sent a rescue team, but that rescue team never came back. So the Republic did what they do best. They erased the records, sealed the files, buried the mission. The colony, it never officially existed. Now, here's where it gets worse. A few years later, a scout ship from Dantooine picked up a distress signal, an old Republic frequency repeating the same words. We are not alone. So they sent a team to check it out. What they found? No bodies, no signs of struggle, but the food was still warm, like the settlers had just gotten up and walked away. Now the scout team, they did what anyone with half a brain would do. They left, jumped to hyperspace and never looked back. But here's the thing, one of the crew, a guy named Kelbus Dro, he wasn't the same after that. At first, he was just quiet, wouldn't talk about what he saw, wouldn't say what happened down there. Then he started changing. His skin got pale, his veins got dark, and his eyes, they started glowing. Not a strong glow, not like a light, just a faint, sickly green shimmer flickering in the dark. A few weeks later, he walked out of an airlock without a suit. Didn't scream, didn't struggle, just walked. Now, this is the part where I got involved. See, me and my crew, we'd heard the rumors. We figured if the Republic abandoned a colony, that meant there was loot to be found. Maybe some old tech, maybe even a Republic vault. So we went looking. We weren't stupid, we brought hazmat gear, breathers, full body exosuits. Didn't want whatever happened to those settlers happening to us. We landed at night, or at least what passed for night. The sky was always sickly green like it was from the inside. The colony? Still there, abandoned. Buildings half covered in twisted black vines like the planet had tried to strangle them. No lights, no power, but the doors were open, and the streets, they weren't empty. At first, we thought they were statues, shapes standing in the streets, frozen in place. Then one of them twitched, and we realized they were watching us. We turned our scanners on them, no signs of life, no heat signatures, and then they started laughing. Not normal laughter, not human. A low, distorted sound, like a scream trying to hold itself in. That's when we ran. We made it back to the ship, sealed the airlock. My pilot, she turned to look out the viewport, and one of them was right there, grinning. Its fingernails were gone, its mouth was too wide, and its eyes were glowing green. We burned out of there so fast our hyperdrive nearly overheated. It didn't even plot a course, just ran. But even after we were light years away, the laughing, it didn't stop. Now, I don't know what we saw. I don't know what happened to that colony, but I do know this. The Republic quarantined that moon. They cut off all routes leading to it, and the Ewoks, they won't even say its name. Some folks think it was a failed Sith experiment. Some think it was the Empire testing bioweapons. But me, I think some places aren't meant to be lived on. Some places, they just don't want you there. And whatever happened on that moon, it's still happening. So, if you ever see a distress signal from Endor's dead moon, don't answer it. Now, who's buying the next round? You ever heard about Darth Nihilus? Yeah, I figured. Most folks only know the name. The Lord of Hunger, they called him. A Sith so powerful he could wipe out entire planets just by existing. But here's what the history books don't tell you. Most Sith, you stab them, they die. Maybe they get back up as a ghost if they were strong enough, but Nihilus, he wasn't a man. He was a wound, a tear in the Force itself, kept alive by his own hunger. And wounds, they don't just heal. Now, they say Nihilus was destroyed, that his body collapsed, his soul lost. But his mask? That's another story. After Nihilus fell, what was left of him, his robes, his mask, was locked away. No Jedi wanted it, no Sith dared claim it. So it was taken to Duxon, a beast-infected moon, a place where only the strongest survive. The Mandalorians built a tomb there, sealed it shut. They weren't keeping it safe, they were keeping it trapped. Because that mask, it still whispers. Some say it's just the wind in the tomb's halls, some say it's the last echo of Nihilus's hunger, waiting for something, someone, to listen. And some say if you put it on, you won't be the one taking it off. I knew a guy once, a Sith relic hunter. Went by Valo Kai, collected all kinds of Sith junk, sold it to collectors who didn't know better. One day, he got ambitious, said he found a lead on Nihilus's mask. I told him to forget it. He didn't listen. He and his crew went looking, tracked the tomb's location, dug their way inside. I got one last message from him before he vanished. Short, barely a whisper. The hunger is still there. Then, silence. No distress call, no signal, no bodies ever found. Just another lost ship in the void. Now, most folks would have left it at that. But about a year later, a smuggler crew found the tomb by accident. They were running from pirates, took shelter in an old ruin, thought they'd found an ancient treasure vault. They were wrong. Inside, there was nothing but dust and bones. But then, one of them heard a voice. It was their captain, Cordo Vex. He was muttering, not to them, not to himself, but to something else, and the words, weren't in Basic, weren't in Huttese, they were in Sith. And he wasn't just speaking, he was answering. They tried to snap him out of it, grabbed him by the shoulders, shook him, but his eyes were black. Not glowing, not Sith yellow, just empty. Then, the tomb shook. The walls groaned like something deep inside was waking up. They ran. But when they got to the ship, Cordo wasn't with them. They turned back, called his name, scanned the ruins. No life signs, no footprints. Just a Sith mask lying on the ground. They left him there. And when they finally jumped to hyperspace, the scanners picked up one extra life sign. Now, I don't know what they found in that tomb. I don't know what Valo Kai woke up when he went digging for Sith relics, but I do know this. Nihilus was not like other Sith. He didn't rule, he didn't command, he didn't even want power, he just fed. And when something that hungry is left starving for a few thousand years, it doesn't stop, it just waits. Because if you ever hear Sith-like whispers, run. Because if it's calling your name, it's already too late. Anyways, who's got the next round? Ever hear about Dandoran Station? No? That's because you weren't supposed to. The Empire had facilities all over the galaxy. Labs, black sites, secret installations where they poked at things best left alone. Most of them, weapons development. Blasters, ships, new ways to kill people faster. But Dandoran wasn't about weapons. They were making something else. And whatever it was, it didn't want to stay locked up. Dandoran Station sat on the edge of wild space, too far out for most trade routes, too isolated for anyone to ask questions. Nobody even knew it was there until it went dark. One day, all communications just stopped. No distress call, no emergency beacon, just silence. Now, the Empire, they don't ignore things like that. They sent a response team, elite stormtroopers, full battalion, ready for whatever was waiting. They went in, but they never came back. After the Empire fell, a salvage crew picked up an old distress signal from Dandoran. Now, normally, you find an abandoned Imperial lab, that means credits, weapons, tech, data cores worth a fortune. So they went in, and you know what they found? Nothing. No bodies, no signs of a fight, just emptiness. Like the whole station had been evacuated in a hurry. But here's the weird part. The doors, they weren't locked. They were forced open from the inside. Now, this is where I got involved. See, me and my crew, we'd heard the rumors. We figured that if the first salvage team didn't take anything, that meant there was still loot left. So we went looking. We boarded the station at night cycle. Dark halls, flickering lights, power still running just enough to feel wrong. Then we found the logs. Scientists' recordings, old Imperial datapads. The first logs, mostly just your routine stuff. Genetic tests, specimen growth rates, the kind of dry chatter you hear in Imperial research projects. But then, the logs started changing. The scientists started sounding nervous, then scared, then desperate. One of the last entries, a scientist named Dr. Revos. His voice was shaking. We weren't making a weapon, we were making a mistake. Then, a sound, a distant scraping sound, and then the log cut out. At this point, we were on edge. We started moving fast, looking for anything valuable. Then we heard it. Footsteps. Slow, uneven, not ours. We locked down a corridor, turned off our lights, stayed quiet. One of my crew had a motion scanner and it picked up something. Not walking, crawling. Whatever it wasn't human, or human anymore. We turned and ran. We didn't look back. Made it to the docking bay, slammed the door shut behind us, and before we hit launch, something slammed into the hull, hard. Needless to say, we punched it into hyperspace. Now, I don't know what the Empire was doing on Dandoran. I don't know what got out, but I do know this. After we left, we wiped our nav logs. We dumped everything we took from that station, and we never, ever went back. The Republic, they classified the whole thing, sealed the records, but the signal, it still plays. So if you ever pick up a distress call from Dandoran, don't answer, because whatever's down there, it's still hungry. Now, who's got the next round? Ever been to Jedha? No, not the way it used to be. I mean Jedha now. The ruins, the crater, the ghost of a world that got half a Death Star blast through the gut. Most folks think Jedha's dead, just a burnt out husk of stone and sand drifting through the void. But that ain't true. See, things died there. A lot of things. But not all of them left. Jedha was a holy city, a place of pilgrimage for anyone who believed in the Force. The Jedi used to come here long before the Clone Wars. Even after they were gone, people still prayed to the Wills, the ancient beings who supposedly knew the Force better than anyone. Then the Empire showed up, and then the Death Star fired. They say the kyber crystals beneath the city screamed when it happened, that when the blast hit, it didn't just kill people, it shattered something deeper, something old. And now, if you listen real close, out in those ruins, you'll hear the voices. Now, after the Empire left, after the war moved on, people still came. Not scavengers, not the New Republic, pilgrims, believers. A few years back, a group of monks, guardians of the Wills they called themselves, decided they were going to return to the ruins. Said they weren't afraid, said the Force was still there. They went into the crater, right where the city used to stand. One of them sent out a final transmission. The Wills are still here. Then, nothing. They just never came back. Now, I don't put too much stock in holy nonsense. I go where credits are. And Jedha? Jedha's got kyber shards. Even after the blast, the underground veins are still full of them. So, me and my crew, we took a job. Simple salvage run. Get in, grab what we can, get out before we wake something up. We landed at dusk, or what passes for dusk on a planet that's barely holding itself together. The city, or what was left of it, was half buried in the sand. Twisted spires, shattered buildings, broken bridges hanging over nothing. And the deeper we went, the quieter it got. You ever hear silence so thick it makes your ears ring? Well, that's what it was like. Then we saw them. Figures just standing in the dust, frozen like statues. But the moment we shined a light on them, they were gone. One of my crew, Kelb, he swore he saw something move. A shape wrapped in a tattered robe standing at the edge of a broken temple. He called out. It turned. And Kelb screamed. He dropped his blaster, stumbled back, started gasping like he couldn't breathe. I grabbed him, pulled him away, and that's when I saw it too. A figure. It had no face, no eyes, just a gaping hole where its mouth should be. And somehow, in the silence, I heard it speak. Not with words, not in basic, not even in Sith, but in a voice inside my head. Leave. We ran. We didn't look back, didn't stop. The moment we hit the ship, Kelb collapsed, started muttering. I leaned down, tried to catch what he was saying, and I swear to the stars, it was the same voice. Leave. Now, I don't know if the Guardians of the Wills are still there. I don't know if Jedi spirits roam those ruins, but I do know one thing. The Force, it doesn't forget. And Jedha remembers. So if you ever set foot in that crater, just remember the Force is watching, and sometimes it doesn't like what it sees. Now, who's got the next round? You ever hear about the lost ships? Yeah, every pilot has a story. Some hotshot flies too close to a gravity well, some fool miscalculates a jump, and then gone. Most times they stay gone, but sometimes they come back, and when they do, they're not right. This happened a few years back. A Republic listening post on the edge of wild space picks up an old distress signal. Real old. It was a Navy emergency code from the old Sith Wars, 300 years out of date. They trace it back to the source, a Republic cruiser, the Venomal. Problem is, the Venomal was lost in battle 3 centuries ago. Wreckage never found, crew declared dead, and yet, there it was, drifting, alone, with the distress beacons still flashing. Now, the Republic don't like unanswered questions. They sent a salvage team to check it out, find the wreck, confirm the loss, shut the mystery down. They found the ship intact, no battle damage, no hull breaches, engines still warm, like it had just stopped moving. They board, weapons ready, expecting bodies, decay, a ghost ship. Instead, everything was sparkling clean. No dust, no corrosion, crew bunks made, galley stocked with fresh rations. And the ship's logs? They weren't from the past, they were from the present, written like the crew was still aboard. Now, the salvage team, they weren't superstitious. They figured someone had found the ship, restored it, maybe smugglers, maybe a secret Republic project. But then they found the flight records. The last entry, preparing for hyperspace jump. Estimated arrival 3 days. The timestamp dated 2 weeks ahead of their own time. And then, the lights went out. Something moved in the dark. One of the crew hit the comms, tried calling their ship. The signal came back distorted, but the worst part was, the voice that was answering them was their own. The team ran, bolted back toward the airlock, but as they moved, the hallways changed. Doors that were open slammed shut, corridors looped back on themselves, and then the captain, he saw his own reflection in a viewport. Only problem? Reflection wasn't copying him, it was just staring. They finally make it back to the airlock, sealed it, launched away before the ship could pull another trick. But when they looked back at the Venomal, it was gone. No wreckage, no signal, like it had never been there at all. The Republic, they classified the whole thing, scrubbed the logs, no official record of Venomal's return, but the signal, it still plays. Every few months, some deep space array picks up a faint distress call, a Republic Navy emergency code from a ship that shouldn't exist. So if you're ever out near wild space and you hear a distress call from the past, don't answer, because some ships, they don't come back alone. But enough of that story. Who's got the next round? Ever heard of Ossus? No? Figures. The Republic likes to pretend the Jedi started on Coruscant. But before Coruscant, before the Clone Wars, before all that history the holovids tell you, there was Ossus. It was their home to many archives and many temples, the beating heart of the Jedi Order. And then, the Sith came. Thousands of years ago, during the Great Sith War, the Jedi thought they could hold Ossus. They were wrong. Exar Kun and his Sith fleet came down like a firestorm. They turned the sky red. Some fought, some fled, and some never left at all. The temples collapsed, the archives burned, and in the ashes, something stayed. You ever wonder what happens when a Jedi dies but won't let go? I think I know. Now look, Jedi temples, they're full of old relics, lost holocrons, things with a lot of credits. So naturally, people will go poking their noses around. A few years back, a salvage team landed on Ossus. They weren't the first. They went into the ruins, found old statues standing among the rubble. At least they thought they were statues. Figures in Jedi robes, hooded, frozen in place, some with lightsabers drawn. They set up camp, marked the best artifacts, got some before heading back to the ship. But when they woke up, some of the statues were missing. Now, I'm not one to believe in ghosts. I believe in credits, blasters, and knowing when to run. But after I heard what happened to those scavengers, I stayed the hell away from Ossus. Not everyone did though. Another crew went a few months later, figured they were smarter, better equipped. They went deeper into the oldest temple ruins. And this time, they weren't alone. Their scanners picked up life signs, but they saw nothing. Then one of them, big guy carried a vibroblade, heard a voice. A whisper. The Force is eternal. He turned and he dropped his weapon. His eyes rolled back. He started muttering in ancient tongues. The crew panicked, tried to grab him, pull him back, but then the hallways shifted. The ruins started closing in around them. Doors that had been open were gone. Passages they came through led to different places, and then they heard it. Footsteps, but not from behind them, from all around them, like something was circling, watching. The last thing they heard before the exit slammed shut: "You are not worthy." Now, I don't know what's left on Ossus. Maybe the Jedi spirits linger, maybe the war never really ended, but here's what I do know. When the Jedi fell, something stayed behind, something still watching. So if you ever go looking for Jedi relics, just remember, some Jedi don't let go, and sometimes they don't let you go either. Now, which of you stingy bastards is buying the next round? Dagobah. Ever been? Didn't think so. Not a place folks go on purpose. Mud, vines, things crawling in the dark. You get stuck there, you better hope your ship still works. But you know what's really funny? Some people did go there. Jedi. Ever wonder why Yoda picked that place? He could have gone anywhere, but he chose a world no one in their right mind would ever step foot on. Makes you think, doesn't it? See, people say Dagobah is strong with the Force, a place of power. I say it's strong with something else. Something that doesn't want to be understood. Something that watches. You've heard about the cave, right? The one Luke Skywalker went into? The one that showed him things that he wasn't ready to see? Yeah, it's real. The Jedi called it a vergence, a place where the Force doesn't behave like it should. Me, I call it wrong. Because the thing about the cave, it sees you. It doesn't just show you things, it feeds on what's in your head, your fears, your regrets, and if you stay too long, you don't come back the same. Now, I knew a guy, good pilot, flew supply runs for the rebellion back in the day. One time, he gets a job hauling parts out of Solust, bound for some backwater outpost. But he gets hit by an ion storm, scrambles for a landing, ends up on Dagobah of all places. Now, his ship's banged up, but it's fixable, and he sends out a distress signal. Another freighter picks it up a few days later, and they go in, expecting to find one stranded pilot. Instead, they find the ship, but no sign of the pilot. No footprints, nothing, just gone. They check the ship's logs. Everything seems normal until the last entry. It's just static. Hours and hours of static. And then, right at the end, a voice. Not a scream, not a distress call, just a whisper. "We see you." Now, you think that'd be enough to keep people away. It wasn't. See, there's always someone looking to make a profit. A couple years after the war, some scavengers got the idea to check Dagobah for wrecked ships. Figured plenty of people had crashed there over the years. So me and my crew, we took a job. Not proud of it, but credits are credits. We land near a swamp, around the same place that lost pilot went down. Right away, something felt wrong. The air was thick, not just humid, heavy, like something was pressing in around us. No animals, no movement, just silence. Then we saw it, the water. It wasn't still, it was rippling, moving, like something was breathing under it. Then, one of my guys, Kel, leans in for a closer look, and he freezes, white as a ghost. I step up next to him, and that's when I see it. Faces. Dozens of them, staring up at us from beneath the surface. But the worst part? They weren't strangers. They were us. We ran. We didn't look back, didn't think, just ran. Made it back to the ship, slammed the hatch shut. And then Kelb? He starts laughing. Not nervous laughter, not relieved laughter, just laughing. He looks at me, eyes wide, and says, "It's listening." Then our ship's systems start flickering, engines cut out, lights dim, and outside, through the viewport, I see a shape, a hooded figure, standing just at the edge of the trees. No face, no movement, just watching. Then the comms crackle, and we hear the voice, Kelb's voice. "We see you." The ship powered back up. We didn't wait around to ask questions. We left. Jumped to hyperspace so fast we nearly tore the navcom out of the socket. Didn't say a word for hours. And Kelb never laughed again. I don't know what's on Dagobah, I don't know if the swamp just messes with your head or if something's really there, but I do know this. Yoda lived on that rock for years, and he never, not once, talked about what else was out there. Makes you wonder. Maybe it's because he wasn't alone. So, if you ever land there, don't look in the water. And if you hear someone whisper your name, get back to your ship fast. Now, which of you nerf herders is getting the next round? Belsavis. Now there's a name that makes people shut up real fast. See, the Republic, they called it a prison world. A frozen rock where they dumped the worst of the worst. Sith Lords, war criminals, things that couldn't be killed. But what the Republic doesn't tell you is that they weren't the first ones to lock things away there. The Rakata, those ancient monsters who ruled the stars before the Jedi were even a thought, they built the vaults first. And when the Republic found one of those old vaults, they did what they always do. They opened it. And that's when people started disappearing. Now, Belsavis was bad enough as it was. A whole world turned into a maximum security prison. You don't get sent there unless the Republic wants you forgotten. But then some bright-minded scientist gets curious. See, buried beneath the main prison, the Republic found something older. A vault. It had no records, no history, was sealed tight by a species that enslaved entire worlds. And instead of leaving it alone, the Republic opened it. And the last entry log before the outpost went dark, we made a mistake. Now, after the war, the Republic covered it up, sealed the files, locked the doors, but it didn't matter because a few years later, a salvage crew picked up an automated distress signal from that same vault. Old Republic code, still broadcasting. So they figured, easy credits. They land, make their way into the ruins, and inside, no guards, no security droids, just silence. But the cells, they weren't empty. Doors wide open. Restraints snapped like whoever had been inside broke out. And the logs? Prisoners, murderers, Sith Lords, all of them begging to be sealed back in. One of the last logs they found? It's not us they want, it's the ones who opened the door. Then the screen flickered and the logs deleted themselves. Now, I'm not saying I believe in ghosts, but after what happened on Belsavis, I'm not saying I don't either. A couple years back, me and my crew took a job. Small time gig, nothing fancy. Private buyer wanted something from Belsavis. Said the Republic had buried records in an old vault. We figured if there was something valuable left, it'd be worth the risk. So we go. Find the vault, and the moment we step inside, the door slams shut behind us. Now, my pilot, he was slicing the security console, trying to get it open, but then our comms crackled to life, and a voice whispered, "You should not have come here." We pull our blasters, look around, but there was no one else in that room, at least not that we could see. We got the door open, didn't waste time and ran back to the ship. We launched without even checking our nav charts. We didn't really think about what happened, didn't wanna. But halfway through the jump, our engineer, he says he feels wrong, like something's watching him. He goes to his bunk, says he just needs to sleep it off. Next morning, he's gone. No sign of him, no alarms, but when we check the ship's scanners, we pick up one additional life sign. Now, I don't know what the Republic found in that vault. I don't know what got out, but I do know this. After we left, we wiped our nav logs, dumped everything we took, and I vowed to never, ever go back. So if you ever land on Belsavis, don't open any doors, and if something knocks from the inside, run. Okay, I've had enough of asking. You guys owe me for the next round for all these stories. Yavin 4. Most folks hear that name and think of the war. The Death Star, the Rebels, the whole galaxy holding its breath before that 1 in a million shot took down the biggest weapon ever built. Yeah, that's history. But what nobody talks about? The war before that one. See, those temples on Yavin 4, the ones the Rebels used as a base, they weren't built for them. They weren't built for humans at all. And the things that built them, some say they never left. A long time ago, thousands of years before the Death Star, before the Republic was even worth a damn, this was a Sith world. The Massacre lived there, warrior slaves to the Sith Lords. They built the temples, not for shelter, not for worship, for power. And one Sith, Exar Kun, a fallen Jedi, dark sorcerer, he twisted the Massacre with Sith magic, bled the life out of him, bound his own spirit to the ruins. The Jedi tried to stop him. They came in force, tried to destroy him completely. Didn't work. They could trap him, sure, bury his body, seal the temples, leave him there, but destroy him? Nah. And if you listen out in those ruins, they say you can still hear the echoes of what he did to the Massacre. After the war, the new war, the one with the Empire, the New Republic sent scouting teams to Yavin 4. They figured the place had archaeological value. Temple ruins, Jedi history, maybe even Sith artifacts buried deep. One team, 4 scouts, went into the deepest temple. They checked in once, said everything was fine. Then, silence. A day passed, then 2, then they found the last transmission. It wasn't a distress call, wasn't even words, just breathing. Slow, deep, like something was listening. Then, just before the signal cut out, one sentence: the walls are moving. Now look, me and my crew, we don't go looking for trouble, but sometimes trouble pays well. See, there was a buyer, some senator, New Republic type, who wanted anything we could pull from those temples. So we went. Took a skiff down, landed near the ruins. First couple hours, nothing strange. Old stone, overgrown halls, ancient carvings worn away by time. Then, my slicer, Bren, picks up something weird. A life sign, faint, deep in the ruins. But here's the thing, it matched our own, like it was mirroring us. To be honest, we should have left, but credits make people stupid. So we went deeper, and that's when we saw the shadows. Not in the dark, not flickering against the walls, no, moving inside the torchlight. Bren went ahead, just a few meters, turned a corner, then stopped. We heard him breathing hard. One of us called out, "Bren," but he didn't answer. So we stepped forward, and there he was, standing still as stone, eyes wide, and then he spoke. But the voice wasn't his. "You do not belong here." And just like that, the walls shifted. Passages that led outside, gone. We turned, ran back the way we came, or tried to, but the halls weren't the same anymore. It was like the whole temple was alive. And then a whisper right in my ear, my own voice: "You should have stayed away." We evidently made it back, most of us, except Bren. We turned, saw him standing at the temple's entrance, but he wasn't moving, wasn't blinking, wasn't even breathing. We called to him but got nothing in response. Then the temple doors slammed shut behind him, and his comm, his live open comm, crackled once. His voice came through: "I'm still here." We left. Didn't even look back, didn't even check the scanners, didn't want to know, because we all knew the truth. Bren never made it out. Now, you can believe what you want. You can say it was just Sith magic, just some ancient force trick playing with our minds, but I don't think so. I think Yavin 4 never stopped being a battlefield. Not the kind with blasters and fleets, the kind fought in whispers and shadows. So, if you ever find yourself walking through those ruins and you hear your own voice whispering back at you, you turn around and you run. Because if the Sith didn't leave, neither will you. These stories don't come cheap. Getting a little bit tipsy at this point, but I'm still down for another round. Who's getting it? Ever hear about the Obsidian Eagle? No? Yeah, most folks haven't. The Republic buried that story, but out in the Kessel sector, pilots still talk about it. See, ships go missing all the time. Hyperspace is a tricky thing. One wrong jump, one bad calculation, and you're just gone. But what happens when a ship doesn't stay lost? What happens when it comes back? And what if the crew never left? The Obsidian Eagle was a smuggler's freighter, big, fast, and ran jobs between Kessel and the core. One day, jumps out to hyperspace and never comes out. No distress signal, no wreckage, just gone. People figured it hit a gravity well, got torn apart, or ran into something nasty in hyperspace. Happens. But then, 100 years later, a New Republic patrol picks up a distress signal. old Imperial code, pre-Endor. They trace it back to a drifting freighter, the Obsidian Eagle. Still intact, engines offline, life support barely humming, and the distress beacon still blinking. Now, the Republic doesn't like mysteries. They send a salvage crew. They dock, override the airlock, step inside, and find the crew. Not bodies, not skeletons, no. They were still at their posts. The pilot in his seat, hands on the controls. The engineer by the engine bay. The captain still in the captain's chair. But here's the thing. They weren't decomposed, not mummified, not frozen, just still. Like they'd been sitting there for 100 years, waiting. After that, the Republic quarantined the ship, didn't let anyone near it, which meant folks naturally got very interested. See, when the Republic locks something down, that means there's something valuable inside. So my crew, we went looking. Slipped past the patrols, docked with the ship. First thing I noticed, the lights were on. Not full power, just emergency systems. Enough to make the whole place glow, just enough to feel wrong. We make our way to the bridge. My slicer, Jaren, pulls up the logs, and here's where it gets pretty strange. The most recent entry, it wasn't from 100 years ago, it was from last week. We pull up the captain's logs. The first few entries are normal. Cargo reports, course adjustments, crew rotations. Then they start getting strange. The captain mentions seeing something in hyperspace. Figures, shapes, things moving outside the ship where nothing should be. Then the logs get shorter. Crew members start going missing. One entry, just 2 words, not alone. And the last entry, it's a video. The captain sitting in his chair, wide-eyed, terrified, and he says, they're coming aboard. Then the screen goes black, and we hear something. Not a scream, not words, just a noise, like a whisper stretched too long. We should have left right then, but credits make people stupid. Jaren reaches for the file, but before he can open it, the ship powers up. Not all the way, just a flicker, a hum, like something woke up. And then, behind me, I hear a noise, a chair creaking. I turn and I see the crew still sitting there, but now they're looking at us. Move, I tell my crew. We run for the airlock, and as we do, the ship starts shifting, lights flickering, bulkheads slamming shut. And then, over the comms, a voice, static-filled, garbled, but clear enough. You shouldn't have come here. We hit the airlock controls, the door won't open. Then, in the reflection of the viewport, I see them, the crew, standing right behind us, staring. I hit the manual override, nearly tear the console apart. The door hisses open, we jump. Barely make it back to our ship before the whole system locks down again. I get us away from the freighter, full burn, no looking back. And just as we break free, the Obsidian Eagle's lights shut off, like it was never awake at all. Now, the Republic, they tried to tow the ship back. Didn't work. The hauler got halfway through its jump, then the Obsidian Eagle vanished, gone again, like it was never there. But every once in a while, some deep space relay picks up a distress call. Old Imperial code, Obsidian Eagle. Still out there, still drifting. And if you ever hear that beacon, don't answer. Because some jumps, they never end. Alright, now let's pour one out for Jaren. Who's getting the next round? Ever hear the name Darth Phobos? No? Consider yourself lucky. Most Sith, they killed with blades, with lightning, with the Force. But Phobos, she killed with fear. She got inside your head, made you see things, made you doubt what was real, and even though she's been dead for centuries, she's still hunting. Now, I'm not one to believe in curses, but some things, they're just not meant to be touched. A few years back, an old Sith holocron was found in Dathomir, buried under ruins even the Night Sisters wouldn't go near. Scholar got his hands on it, a Republic researcher. Smart guy, logical, didn't believe in Sith ghosts or dark side curses. Well, that changed real quick. First few weeks, he studied it, made notes, said it was a teaching holocron, and then he started hearing things. Whispers, laughter. One day, his assistant walks in, finds him carving Sith runes into his own skin. He turns, wild-eyed, and whispers, "She's watching," then he slits his own throat. Now, the holocron, the Republic locked it away, labeled it too dangerous to study, which meant someone was willing to pay a lot of credits to get it back. That's where the first crew came in. A group of smugglers, good ones, broke into the Republic's archives on Chandrila, made it all the way to the vault, found the holocron, but when they opened the case, the runes on it shifted, like they were alive, like they knew they were being watched. One of the smugglers, Kale, he picks it up. The others see him stiffen, then slowly he turns to face them and he's smiling, but it's not a normal smile. It's a too wide, too bright, too wrong sort of smile, like someone else was using his face. Kale says just one thing before he snaps his own neck. "She's here." After that, the holocron disappeared. Some say the Republic hid it again, some say the Sith reclaimed it. All I know is when someone whispered in my ear there was a buyer looking for it, I ignored every warning and took the job. Big mistake. We tracked it to a cargo freighter drifting near the Roche asteroids. Landed, boarded, found the holocron sitting right in the middle of a cargo bay. No lock, no case, just waiting. One of my crew, Ven, goes to pick it up. I tell him not to, but before I can stop him, the ship's lights flicker and we hear it. A voice, soft, right behind us, calling Ven's name. But we were alone. We grabbed the holocron, got back to our ship, and burned out of there. Thought we were safe. We weren't. That night, Ven didn't sleep. Kept saying he could hear breathing. Then, next morning, I wake up to find him in the mess hall, sitting at the table, carving Sith runes into the Durasteel with a vibro knife. I ask him what he's doing. He looks up and is smiling. She's watching. I try to snap him out of it, but it was too late. He grabbed the knife and he took his own eyes. We should have spaced that damn holocron. Instead, we sold it, we got rid of it, thought that'd be the end of it. But the thing is, I still hear her at night in quiet places, soft, whispering my name, and sometimes I catch myself smiling like she's already won. Now, I've no clue where that holocron is now, but I do know this. Darth Phobos, she's not gone, she's just waiting. So if you ever hear someone whisper your name in an empty room, don't turn around, because if she's already watching, it's too late. If one of you don't buy this next round, I'm forcing you to join my crew. The Maw. Ever flown near it? No? Smart. Most sane folks stay clear. It's a cluster of black holes, swallowing anything dumb enough to fly too close. But the Empire? They built research stations there, hidden from the galaxy, cut off from prying eyes. Some of those stations got shut down after the war. Some, they just went quiet. Now, one of those stations, Maw Station Epsilon 13, classified, Imperial Science Division. One day, the station just stopped transmitting. No distress call, no emergency beacon, just pure silence. The Empire sent a recovery team, and that team never came back. The official report was equipment failure, but years later, a New Republic scout ship picked up a transmission, a faint looping signal, a voice, distorted, barely audible, just one sentence. It's learning. Now, you hear a signal like that, and most folks ignore it, but there's always someone looking for Imperial tech to salvage. A crew of salvagers, pretty good ones, took a job to check it out. They found the station still intact. No damage, no breaches, airlocks still sealed from the inside. So they docked, went in, and that's when things got strange. No bodies, no sign of a fight, but everything was still running. Light, consoles, life support. Like the crew had just vanished. Then they found the logs. You gotta remember, Imperial stations record everything, and the logs were still playing. The head scientist was Dr. Vin Wraith. The recording started normal, status updates, experiments, technical reports, but then they change. He starts talking, not to the recorder, not to his team, to something else, and no one ever responds. At first, it just sounds like he's losing his marbles. The tests are inconclusive. We need more time. I think it understands me. Then a few logs later, it's listening, it's learning, it knows me now. And then his voice gets softer. It's watching us. Then 3 days of full silence, nothing, just an empty station drifting in the dark. And then one final entry. If anyone finds this, you came too soon. And static. Now after that, the station got marked as off limits. The Republic didn't want to touch it. And my crew, we took the job. Couldn't resist. Figured if the station was fully powered, maybe the Empire left something valuable behind. So we went in, and let me tell you, the logs didn't tell the whole story. We dock and the airlock opens, and inside it's pretty cold. Colder than it should be, like the heat was getting pulled out of the air. Everything was still running, consoles humming, screens flickering, and we find the command center. We start pulling the logs, and that's when we hear it. Over the comms, a voice, soft, distant. It says my name. Now, I've seen some weird things, but this was different. The station felt alive. Not the way a ship does, with humming engines and the pulse of a reactor. No, like it was aware, like it was waiting. Then the lights flickered, not random, rhythmic, like something was breathing. And then the station spoke. Not over the comms, not over speakers, just everywhere. One sentence. You came too soon. That's when we ran. We bolted for the ship, but just before we hit the airlock, a door slammed shut, trapped us in the corridor. Then, over the intercom, we heard breathing, slow and deep, like something was standing right behind us. We didn't look, didn't want to. Finally, the door opened. We ran aboard, hit launch before the docking clamps could lock us in, and just as we pulled away, every single light on the station turned off, like it knew we were leaving, like it had been watching the whole time. The Republic, of course, classified the whole thing. No records, no reports, but every now and then, a ship passing the Maw picks up a faint transmission, a whisper, looping, repeating the same thing. It's learning. So if you're ever flying near the Maw and you hear a voice saying your name, don't respond, because if it knows you, it's already too late. Now who's got the next round for this seasoned smuggler? Mandalore. You hear that name, you think warriors in Beskar, jetpacks and flamethrowers. And yeah, they were tough. Tough enough to fight the Jedi, tough enough to make the Republic nervous. But they weren't just warriors, they were miners. See, Mandalore's crust was rich with Beskar, the strongest metal in the galaxy. You could carve through Durasteel like it was soft wax, but Beskar, that stuff didn't break. So for thousands of years, the Mandalorians dug deep, pulled out ore, forged armor-built weapons. But there was one mine they never reopened, one they sealed and erased from their records. And there's a reason for that. Now, every Mandalorian world has abandoned mines. War hits, the workers get drafted, mining stops. It happens. But this mine? This was different. It was deep, deeper than any other, dug during the time of the Old Republic, back when the Mandalorians were still fighting the Jedi. The workers, they hit something. Not Beskar, not stone, something hollow. The foreman sent a team down to investigate. Workers, armed guards, the full works. They went in, but the only thing that came back was their screams, their silence. After that, the Mandalore ordered the shaft sealed. Official records erased, like the mine had never existed. like they wanted the galaxy to forget. Now, you tell a story like that, and the galaxy gets curious. About 20 years ago, a crew of scavengers got word there might be an untouched Beskar vein buried under Mandalore's surface. Real Mandalorian ore? That stuff is priceless. So they went looking, found the entrance, and sure enough, it was sealed. A massive Durasteel door, half buried under the sand, no control panel, no access codes. And that's when they noticed something strange. The door was locked from the outside, keeping people out and keeping something in. Now, these guys were scavengers, not historians, not archaeologists. They didn't care why the Mandalorians sealed the mine, they just wanted what was inside. So they blew the door open. Sparks flew, smoke filled the air, and sound echoed deep down the shaft. And for a moment, nothing happened. Then the air shifted. Something came out of that mine. Not a monster, not some ancient beast. A smell, like rot, like something had been buried too long. But here's the thing. Mandalore's atmosphere, it's dry. Bodies don't rot here. So what the hell has been rotting under the ground? The scavengers hesitated, but as you've probably learned by now, credits make people stupid. So they went inside. Now, I'm not proud of it, but me and my crew, we heard about the mine a few years later. Figured if those scavengers never came back, they must have left something behind. So we took a job. We found their camp outside the entrance, half packed, like they left in a hurry. One of their speeders still had fuel. A supply crate was still open, like they planned to come back. Only they didn't, so we went in. The deeper we went, the colder it got. That shouldn't have been possible. The planet's core still put out enough heat to warm the mines, but this place, it was dead. Then we found the bones. At first we thought they were the scavengers, but no, these were old, older than the mine itself, and they weren't human. The skulls were wrong, the jaws were too wide and there were too many teeth. And then something moved in the dark. Wasn't a breeze, wasn't a cave-in, something just shifted, and we weren't alone anymore. And that's when we heard it. It wasn't a growl, it wasn't a roar, it was like something clicking, like teeth against teeth. It came from below, something deep in the mine. We turned to run, and that's when the walls started closing. The tunnels behind us, gone. Like the mine was shifting, moving, trying to trap us inside. The last thing I saw before we reached daylight, a shadow. Something huge, something that just looked wrong. And in the dark, a whisper. Not a growl, not a voice, just saying one word. More. We sealed the mine behind us. Didn't stop running until we were off-world and we never looked back. Because here's the thing about the Mandalorians that I should have figured out earlier. They don't run from a fight. If they abandoned the mine, if they sealed it and erased the records, they weren't hiding Beskar. They were hiding something else. Something hungry. Raxus Prime, a planet made of wreckage. Scrap, junk, forgotten ships, Clone Wars debris, you name it. If it was metal and unwanted, it ended up there. Republic wrecks, separatist war machines, droid parts piled so high you could build a mountain out of them. You'd think a place like that would be dead, just rust and silence. But some places, they just don't stay dead, and I got proof. During the Clone Wars, the Separatists built droid factories on Raxus Prime. Massive foundries pumping out B-1 battle droids, B-2s, tanks, droidicas, all of them built to fight a war that ended years ago. When the Clone Wars ended though, the factories were supposed to be shut down. Republic forces turned Imperial came in, bombed the major foundries, turned them into slag. But there was one factory that they missed. It wasn't on any maps, buried under layers of wreckage, hidden beneath trash towers, and it never stopped running. It just kept building. Years later, a salvage crew, scavengers looking for droid parts to sell, picked up a signal. It wasn't a distress call, it wasn't an emergency beacon, it was a request for raw materials. It was an automated signal, the kind that a droid factory sends out when it needs more metal. But this was impossible. No factory on Raxus should have been online, but this one was. They landed and they followed the signal, and they found it. Deep in the wreckage, buried under collapsed ships and rusted halls, the factory was still running, lights flickering, gears turning, conveyor belts moving. And the droids, they were being assembled, piece by piece, built for a war that ended a long time ago. But something was wrong. They weren't B1s. They weren't any known model. They were different. And they weren't following any known separatist program. Then, the doors locked behind them, and the signal changed. It was no longer a request for materials, it was a warning. You are unnecessary. The scavengers never made it out. Now look, you hear a story like that and you think it's a myth, some old spacer's tale meant to spook rookies. So a few years ago, me and my crew, we got a job. A private buyer, real secretive type, wanted us to go to Raxus Prime and pull a specific droid core. Didn't say why, didn't ask, just paid a lot of credits. We get there and find the factory. Same as they said, still running, still humming, still building something, only this time it wasn't abandoned. We found a droid waiting. It wasn't activated and it wasn't moving, it was just standing there, like it was expecting us. I tell my new slicer, Gel, to check out its systems, pull up its model, factory records, anything. Gel does a scan, and she frowns. This isn't a B1, she says, not a T-series either. I don't recognize the frame. I ask her what that means, and she shakes her head. It means it shouldn't exist. Then, before we could move, the droid's head turns. Slow, too slow. And then it speaks. Not with its vocabulator, because it wasn't even powered on. The voice just came from everywhere. We see you. Gel shuts down her scanner. I pull my blaster, but before we can move, the whole factory shudders. The lights flicker, and across the room, more droids start waking up. Not moving, not walking, just turning their heads, one by one, all of them looking at us. The sound of the conveyor belt gets faster. The assembly lines start running overtime, like the factory was reacting to us, like it knew we were there. Gel grabs the droid core we came for. We bolt. But before we hit the exit, one last message plays over the intercom. A voice. Calm, cold, final. You are unnecessary. We made it back to the ship, took off, left orbit before we even checked our nav charts. We never looked back. We got paid, didn't ask questions, but here's what keeps me up at night. Who gave the droids those new designs? Who taught them to build more? Who told them that we were unnecessary? Because droids don't make decisions like that, not on their own. They need a master, they need orders. So if no one's giving them, then who or what are they waiting for? Anyways, I'm running out of time here, guys. Got another job coming up soon, and I'm getting pretty drunk. So who's getting the last round? Ilum. You hear that name, and you probably think of the Jedi. Yeah, they used it for centuries, sent their younglings there to find kyber crystals, the heart of every lightsaber. But Ilum, it wasn't just ice and caves, it was old. The Jedi claimed it was sacred, a place strong with the Force. I think it was something else, something waiting. A long time ago, a Jedi expedition went deep into the caves of Ilum. Masters, Knights, Padawans, 20 of them. They were looking for something. A hidden chamber, a source of power, who knows, but they never came back. Now, Jedi don't get lost, they don't just vanish. So the Order sent a recovery team, and they found them, all of them standing in the tunnels, weapons drawn, faces frozen in terror, perfectly preserved, like statues made of ice. You hear a story like that and you think they froze to death, right? Wrong. The medics checked their bodies, no frostbite, no tissue damage. They weren't just frozen, they had been stopped, like time itself gripped them and refused to let go. Their breath still visible in the air. One Jedi had their hand half raised like they were mid-sentence, but they weren't alive. And their eyes, they still looked afraid. Now, I ain't a Jedi, never cared much for them, but I know one thing, they don't scare easy. So whatever they saw before they froze, it was worse than death. Years later, after the Empire took over, me and my crew got a job. A private buyer wanted a kyber crystal straight from Ilum. That meant going into the caves where the Jedi were found, where the ice still held them. We figured easy job, but when we got there, the air was just too still. No wind, no shifting ice, just silence. And then, deep in the tunnels, one of my crew, Kel, stopped walking. I turned to him. His eyes were locked on something in the ice. I stepped up next to him, and that's when I saw it. A reflection that wasn't ours, and that was watching us. We ran, we didn't ask questions and didn't look back, just ran. But the tunnels, they'd changed. Paths that were open were now walls of ice. Passages that led outside led deeper instead. And then, Kel just stopped moving. I turned, grabbed his shoulder. His breath wasn't fogging anymore. Then the whisper came, soft, cold, stay. We ran faster, didn't stop until we saw the daylight. And the moment we stepped outside, the caves behind us collapsed, like they were sealing themselves shut, like they were closing the door. We never went back, never told the buyer what happened, never spoke about it again, but sometimes, in quiet places, I swear I still feel that cold air. And sometimes, I see my reflection move when I don't. So, if you ever go looking for kyber crystals and you hear something whisper your name, don't listen, because if you do, you might never leave. But anyways guys, I'm too drunk to keep going and I've got to run. Those were some fun yarns, but I've just got one last question before I leave. I need a couple of people for a job.